The incursion of the U.S. Capitol struck at the very heart of our republic.
We're going to walk down to the Capitol.
I unequivocally condemn the violence that we saw last week.
Because you'll never take back our country with weakness.
No true supporter of mine could ever endorse political violence.
You have to show strength and you have to be strong.
Whether you are on the right or on the left, a Democrat or a Republican, there is never a justification for violence.
The radical left knows exactly what they're doing. They're ruthless, and it's time that somebody did something about it.
Like all of you, I was shocked and deeply saddened by the calamity at the Capitol last week.
And if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore.
Two speeches from the president. One got him impeached. The other, he hopes, will get him acquitted. Good morning and welcome to Morning Joe. It is Thursday, January 14th. Along with Joe, Willie, and me, we have White House reporter for the Associated Press, Jonathan Lemire. What do you call him? He's like scrubbing bubbles or something?
Lemire?
Yeah.
No, it's not Lemire. It's somebody else. We'll get to it.
Oh, okay.
It's Nichols. Nichols watches all
Nichols.
the crazy Republican conspiracy theories. He's like scrubbing bubbles. Tom Nichols, who's going to be on the show, does it, so we don't have to.
And Lemire does it in the White House. Yeah. Washington anchor for BBC World News America, Katty Kay, joins us, and the host of MSNBC's Politics Nation and president of the National Action Network, Reverend Al Sharpton, joins us this morning. And Scrubbing Bubbles, columnist at USA Today and contributing writer for The Atlantic, Tom Nichols.
He watches and tweets about hours and hours of crazy Republican seditious speeches on the House floor. So we don't have to. We'll get to Tom in 1 second. Willie, just curious, what was your take on Donald Trump's speech last night?
First of all, I'd like a full investigation into the last 30 seconds of the show, the scrubbing bubbles, everything else. We'll get into that in just a moment.
It's my fault.
But my reaction is too little, too late, of course. He said the right words. Yeah. Obviously, he is feeling the pressure. Obviously, a lawyer who is not named Rudy Giuliani, because it appears he's now excommunicated Rudy Giuliani and ordered payments to him to be stopped. Some lawyer got to him and said, you better get out on the record explicitly and clearly and condemn the violence. So that was his audience was for future juries, for courts, but also Mitch McConnell. Mitch McConnell has a decision to make now that the House has voted to impeach. Is he going to lead his caucus? Is he going to lead Republicans in voting to convict when they reconvene next week after a trial? And he's talking to Mitch McConnell, somebody who reportedly he hasn't talked to in several weeks. And basically that was a plea saying, look, Mitch, I condemn the violence. Here I am doing the thing a lot of people are saying I haven't done and should have done much sooner. Please have mercy on me. So in his last 6 days, President Trump is trying to save himself, beginning with that speech.
Jonathan Lemire, tell me, what reports are you getting out of the White House? What was this speech about? Obviously, I mean, it seems to me, we talked a little bit about it last night. What makes the most sense to me is something that you brought up in our conversation, that it didn't have anything to do with politics. It had more to do with liability. My God, the liability that this guy could face after he leaves the White House. And good luck trying to get the Supreme Court to say inciting a riot and insurrection is somehow protected. And he'd be somehow immune from that sort of activity because it was in the course of his regular duties as president. Sedition is not in the course of regular duties as president. And I'm sure he had lawyers that he probably finally paid who said, buddy, it's going to be a long, cold, dark winter after you leave the White House, and you're going to have lawsuits coming at you left and right for this.
Yeah, there's no question what's fueled the president's about face here is exactly that. According to our reporting, he is deeply concerned about the civil cases he could face after leaving the White House, that he could be held responsible for inciting that violence. He's deeply worried about that, and that is what's led to his shift in tone from when we've heard to him. And of course, with any time we start to talk about the president's tone, it's only a matter of time. And we can report that last night the president was even talking to advisors, wondering if that was the right decision, if he had gone too far with his video, because he didn't want to alienate his supporters who had been marching on his behalf. But there are a few things at play here. And he certainly, yes, the terrorists, the insurrectionists. A second impeachment here, and let's stop and take a moment and note that half of all the impeachments carried out in the history of the United States belong to Donald Trump. And that is a remarkable that first line now in his political obituary. And he's concerned, though, about his immediate future. He knows that if convicted, and that remains uncertain. Right now, insiders say that's about a toss-up, whether he will be removed from office or not. But if so, odds are the Senate would also then vote on a measure to prevent him from ever holding federal office again, which, of course, would deny any chance of a 2024 run. And he is banking on that, at least the perception that he's still politically viable, the perception that he's the GOP kingmaker, to fuel his immediate future. He has lost his Twitter account. He has lost his fundraising lists. He has lost, he fears, his hold over the party, despite poll numbers that suggest he's still popular with Republicans. And he needs to maintain those things to stay relevant, which we know he craves most of all, to be talked about, to be on cable, to people be tweeting about it and writing about him, but also to be able to make money. He's going to be leaving the White House in about a week with real concerns about his financial future. New York City has severed contract with him. PGA Golf has severed contracts with him. And that is what he's telling aides about as well. He believes this is an effort to get him, to prevent him from making money and staying relevant. That speech yesterday, an appeal to Mitch McConnell, no doubt, but also to try to ease his reentry to the world after leaving the White House.
It's been hard to really track what he's done in this presidency, right? But one thing he can do is get impeached. President Trump was impeached for a second time yesterday, 1 week after the riot he was charged with inciting, and 1 week before he leaves office. The final vote, 232 to 197. Unlike the first impeachment, which had no Republican support, 10 members of the president's own party voted to impeach, making it the most bipartisan impeachment in U.S. history. Jonathan Lemire wrote this yesterday. His place in the history books rewritten. President Donald Trump endured his second impeachment largely alone and silent. For more than 4 years, Trump has dominated the national discourse like no one before him. Yet when his legacy was set in stone on Wednesday, he was stunningly left on the sidelines. Trump now stands with no equal. The only president to be charged twice with a high crime or misdemeanor, a new coda for a term defined by a deepening of the nation's divides, his failures during the worst pandemic in a century, and his refusal to accept defeat at the ballot box. Before signing the single article of impeachment, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi spoke from the same lectern that was stolen from her office during last week's attack.
Today, in a bipartisan way, the House demonstrated that no one is above the law, not even the President of the United States. That Donald Trump is a clear and present danger to our country, and that once again, we honored our oath of office to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States. So help us God.
So, Katty K, right now, the Republican Party, a good number of them remain loyal to Donald Trump. I suspect, though, the further we get away from Donald Trump in the White House, people are going to be looking at what George Conway was looking at, and that's his record. And George Conway tweeted yesterday. So in a little over 2 years, Donald Trump has lost the House, the Senate, the presidency, and has been impeached 2 times. The man has wrecked Republican majorities in the House and the Senate, and he has split the party in half. So I find it hard to believe that this is a unifying figure that the Republican Party is going to want to move forward with after Donald Trump is gone.
Yeah, I wonder whether what has weakened Donald Trump more than anything else over the last couple of weeks, more than the insurrection on Capitol Hill, more than the second impeachment, was actually that loss in Georgia, which kind of got swallowed up in all the dramatic news last week, because he proved that he is actually not the winner of elections that he has always said he is. And so the Republican Party moving forward, for the Republican grandees moving forward, if they want somebody that's going to have elections around the country, win the Senate seats and keep power, well, Donald Trump hasn't shown their guy. And I think that was a real blow to him. But new polling over the weekend shows that 2/3 of Republicans still believe this election was stolen. So Donald Trump has a way of saying, this is the stuff still Trump.
Caddy, we're having trouble with your Wi-Fi right now. It's going in and out. We'll get back to you in a second. Willie, we'll get back to Caddy in just 1 minute. We'll get the Wi-Fi rechecked. Yeah. But that is a question that really you can see this coming. As my professor in torts, Professor Pearson, said, you should be able to see this coming like a freight train out of the mist. Republicans should have seen this coming, that this man that played to the 40%, that played to the craziest elements of the party, was not going to be able to succeed politically on a nationwide effort. And he's lost the White House, he's lost the Senate, he's lost the House, and he's been impeached twice over the past 2 years.
Lost the popular vote twice as well, for good measure. And Mitch McConnell obviously is very angry with the president for Georgia. I mean, he lost the Senate majority, a lot of people believe, including Mitch McConnell, for Republicans with his conduct, with his behavior, which the way he talked about the voting being rigged in the state of Georgia, that may have depressed enough votes to cost Mitch McConnell his majority. So yes, he's not been a good influence broadly on his party. And Tom Nichols, that was on full display yesterday during the impeachment arguments, during the debate, when you heard, yes, there were 10 Republicans who voted for impeachment, most of those making very difficult votes for them. But the rest of the Republicans, it was a marathon of whataboutism. It was, well, Robert De Niro said something mean once about Donald Trump, so why are we impeaching? There were mean hashtags about President Trump. What about the riots in the streets last summer? Several of them said. Very few of them actually confronted the case in front of them, which was that Donald Trump incited his supporters to rush the Capitol, to kill a Capitol police officer, and to threaten the lives of the leadership of this country, including President Trump's vice president.
It was a shameful display, and it was not just the final trajectory of a Republican Party that sold its soul to Donald Trump, but putting the Republican Party itself on display as an unserious group of people who are incapable of governing. If there were not so much at stake, it was almost laughable. The whole bit about Hollywood hates us, and Robert De Niro wanted to punch the president, and the name checking of Kathy Griffin and all the other celebrities. I mean, this is one of the most important things in the world, impeaching the commander in chief, the most powerful man in the world. And the Republicans were complaining about it like they'd gotten a bad deal on a reality show, which is how most of them are treating it. So I think, when Joe says people should have seen it coming, I think this is the part where a lot of the folks who were never Trump early on warned everybody that it was coming, that all of us said this would be the end of the Republican Party. This would smear conservatism because conservatism now has completely fallen out of the Republican Party. Nobody's serious about ideas. And it would destroy American politics. And here we are.
Yeah, I wrote columns for the Washington Post throughout 2016 saying it's going to destroy conservatism, destroy the Republican Party, and it caused damage to the United States of America. And Reverend Al, Republicans didn't listen then. A few are listening now. But the impact's been devastating. I do want, though, we've been talking about January the 6th a lot. And people that continually are talking about January the 6th and what a blight it was, and I agree it was. But through all of that smoke and through all of that chaos and through the seditious acts, we did overlook three things that happened on that day that are going to impact us over the next 2 years, even more than that riot will. And first thing is, as was brought up by Katty Kay, the Democrats, against all odds, took control of the United States Senate. It's the first thing that happened. The second thing that happened was Joe Biden was, in fact, certified the next president of the United States. And the third thing that happened was Donald Trump was forever exposed for the fascist, tyrannical president that he was and that he was aiming to be. All in all, I would say those three things happening on the same day are going to be looked back upon as a watershed moment in American politics. And I'm just wondering if it's not a watershed moment that we won't look back on and actually not say, well, that's when the center wouldn't hold and things got out of control. That's actually when we actually had to face this country's demons and we started getting to work on cleaning things up.
January 6th will not only be remembered for the calamity that happened, I think it will be the beginning of a new era of where we go forward from here. And the question becomes whether the Democrats that have now seized the Senate, now they control the House, the Senate, and the White House, whether they will deliver on the agenda that they told the voters they would do, that ended up getting the largest turnout of voters in the history of this country, whether they will live up to the promises that were made. If we focus only on the calamity, then we allow the Democrats to escape from what they committed and the mandate that they were given. I feel that it is very important that we focus on where we go from here as we rightfully investigate the calamity that happened. We want to see what Biden's going to do. We want to see what Schumer and Pelosi's going to do around the issues that drove people to the polls in unprecedented numbers. And I think if we miss that, we're going to end up making the calamity that happened become the prelude to the disappointment that will follow. A lot of people put a lot into voting on Election Day, hoping that this would turn the tide another way. We don't want to drown in the tide that we turned.
Yeah.
Let me ask you a question and I'm going to open this up to everybody because it's going to be controversial. Former FBI Director Jim Comey said yesterday that Donald Trump should be pardoned and should consider being pardoned, should be put behind him. I'm not going to go that far. But let me just ask this question, because I'm sure people inside the Biden administration are asking this question right now. Do we really want to start our presidency? Do we really want to turn the page on Trumpism? Do we really want to start with Democratic majorities in the House and in the Senate and a Democratic president in the White House by being occupied by a Senate trial of a guy who is out of the White House and who is likely going to be prosecuted not only in the state of New York, but most likely by the U.S. Attorney in Washington, D.C. Mika, I'll start with you first, because I'm just saying, if I were inside the White House of an incoming president, I would be going, my God, okay, maybe you have to do it. This is a nightmare. We want to turn the page. We want to move forward. That's, I'm sure, how a lot of people in the Biden administration are thinking. They certainly can't say it out loud, though. Mika, you first?
Yeah, no, we don't want to do that. And I'm sure members of the Biden administration do not want to do that, but it's got to be done. I'm sorry, our country is built on principles. It's built on laws. And this president went too far. This isn't one pardon for one thing for some obscure reason that's perhaps debatable.
Well, I'm talking about the impeachment trial.
This has to continue.
So the Senate, you say, even if it dominates Joe Biden's first 100 days in the office, there needs to be a Senate trial.
Nobody wants that, but we have no choice. We as in the members of the Biden administration and Democrats are as bad as the Republicans
All right.
who supported Trump.
Let's go around. Willie, what do you think?
Well, you're right that many in the Biden administration, and Joe Biden has even signaled this, actually, when he talked about hoping they could bifurcate. If they must do the impeachment trial, let's not forget all the initiatives that he has planned. So they don't love the idea, but I think what people would say is that you have to put a marker down in history that this behavior is unacceptable. And it's also the only way to get to what a lot of people want to see in the Democratic Party, which is the disqualification of Donald Trump to run again in 2024, to hover over the country, to hover over our politics. You've got to convict first on impeachment, and then you can have a majority vote on whether or not he's disqualified.
Katty K, is it worth distracting from the Biden agenda the first 100 days? Or would any Democrats on the Hill allow Joe Biden to say, you know what, he's been impeached in the House. We don't have the votes to convict him in the Senate. Let's not distract from the agenda of getting people back to work and taking COVID on, and let's just leave it to the prosecutors to throw him in jail. Would that work with any Democrats on the Hill, Katty?
I mean, it's not what Joe Biden wants to go through this and have this at the beginning of his term. It's very hard to see how Chuck Schumer is not going to have to take up those articles when they're sent to him by Nancy Pelosi. We don't know when that's going to be. The problem is twofold for Biden. First of all, there may not be the vote to convict, so you may go through all of this and not convict. And that then just gives Donald Trump more of a voice, his supporters more a voice. The second is it means we're still talking about Donald Trump for the next few months. Donald Trump is still the focus of opinion. I think his big aim last night was to try and get his Twitter account back. The best thing that can happen for the Democrats is that he stays off Twitter for the next few months. But talking about him at the trial, that's not what Joe Biden wants to be doing. He has no choice, but it's not what he wants.
He may have no choice, but Tom Nichols, I can tell you, Americans want to look forward. They don't want to look back. And listen, don't send your crappy tweets to me because I'm not reading them anyway. I'm just putting this out there because I know that there are people in the Biden administration that have to be thinking, oh, my God, we're going to have Donald Trump has dominated the last 5 years of politics, and he's going to you know what over the first 100 days of our new administration by having a trial in the United States Senate that'll probably be just as inconclusive as the last trial. Tom Nichols, I may not know much about politics, but I know that people care a hell of a lot more about their jobs and about their health and about what happens in their house than they do about what happens in Washington, D.C. Do Democrats in the Senate have to impeach Donald Trump?
Yes, they do. And we're overthinking this. The United States of America is a superpower. The Senate is the world's greatest deliberative body. We are, in fact, capable of walking and chewing gum at the same time. The Senate can take up Joe Biden's agenda. They can confirm his nominees. And then in the afternoon, they can invite the Chief Justice over. They can meet. They can walk through the process of impeachment. A couple of things about this. First,
I'm sorry,
Joe Biden should not let the words Donald Trump pass his lips. Once Joe Biden becomes president, let him get on with the job of being president. The Democrats in the Senate are going to have to finish up this bit of business. Even if Donald Trump ends up being acquitted, every Republican, once again, should have to go on record and cast a vote and explain why Donald Trump should not be vanquished from American public life and rendered incapable of ever holding an office of trust and profit in the United States again. Even if it fails, it's an important part of the democratic, maintaining our democratic culture. So I think, we're trying to think this too many steps ahead. He has been impeached. A trial is necessary. It can happen. Joe Biden can get on with the job of being president, and the Senate can get on with the job of confirming, advising, legislating, and deciding whether or not Donald Trump should be convicted and should ever hold office again.
Tom, let me just tell you, you're the first person who has ever accused me of thinking too much. I assure you I am not. I'm just asking a question, which I now take to Reverend Al. We're 2 votes away from a unanimous vote. Reverend Al, should Biden encourage Democrats to pass on the Senate trial so he can move forward with his agenda, or does he have to move forward and have his first 50, 100 days occupied by Donald Trump's trial?
They should do both at the same time. We should do not one or the other, but both and. I think that the thing that we focus on too much when we ask about the trial is on the perpetrator rather than the victims. 5 people died around this catastrophe. People saw law enforcement officers crushed indoors. We saw the Capitol of the United States under siege. They must be accountable to that. And those that vote to say the perpetrator and the instigator should not be held accountable and should be able to hold office again, we need to make them go on the record. But at the same time, Biden and others that are in his administration have to deal with, we are in the middle of a pandemic. People are dying by the thousands every day. And we need them to proceed to start dealing with the pandemic in a responsible way, dealing with the other issues. We don't have a choice but to rise to the occasion of showing the world we can do both at the same time. Protect the justice for victims and protect the American people that are still, as I'm speaking, many of them on ventilators, many of them are 2 steps away from death, some of it because of the incompetence of the same instigator of the things that we ought to be trying in the U.S. Senate.
And Jonathan Lemire, I'm not going to ask the Associated Press's White House reporter whether the president should be tried in the United States Senate. What I will say is this, though, that the Senate trial, if it moves forward, and I'm sure it will, the Senate trial is going to look far different than the House, what we saw in the House yesterday, in part because, as I said yesterday morning, the evidence gets more damning every day. New videos are released every day. Mikey Sherrill yesterday said that there were members of the House that were giving tours to insurrectionists to give them guidance on where to go after they break into the Capitol. This is going to be a slow motion train wreck. And every day that passes by between now and whenever that Senate trial begins is going to be a day where Donald Trump's actions and the Republican House members' actions that were connected with this group are going to look worse, going to look more seditious, going to look more traitorous.
To that point, first, Joe, the horror has only grown the further we've gotten away from the siege of the Capitol. And certainly there's also the realization that things as bad as they were could have been that much worse. A few different turns taken by the insurrectionists, if there weren't a few individual acts of bravery by Capitol police officers, we may have ended up with a much, much higher death toll and scenes of true terror from lawmakers inside that building. To the overall question, though, about the Biden approach, I've talked to people in the president-elect's orbit about what they want to do, and they've been telegraphing it subtly but somewhat clearly. Their focus in their public statements is very much about starting the Biden administration, in particular, getting his cabinet appointees on the job, getting them approved, getting them confirmed, particularly starting with the national security team. That's where they're putting their outward energy. They want to make sure that gets done right away. We also know the president-elect has been unveiling his new COVID-19 response and vaccination program. That's also their focus. But they recognize they can't get in the way of this. Are they happy about a Senate trial of Donald Trump dominating some of the headlines in their first days? No, of course not. They've made that clear. But they also recognize, they saw what happened in 2008 when Joe Biden, as vice president, was part of a team in the Obama administration that made a decision not to pursue action of people from the George W. Bush administration, which angered a lot of Democrats, angered a lot on the left. And that energy is so much greater this time around, that we now, of course, have had a second impeachment of Donald Trump. They can't risk being seen of getting in the way of that. They're fearful of losing a lot of the momentum they have, the support that they have that got them into office, which, of course, let's remember, this election, certainly it was about Joe Biden. This election was also about choosing not Donald Trump, that it was a rebuke of Donald Trump for the presidency. And they know this is something that's not ideal, but they're going to have to put up with. They want the Senate to be able to do 2 things at once.
Okay. Oh, I appreciate the question, Joe, but I would ask that you don't ask it again because it is not a question. It's just not a question. First of all, the Biden administration, Joe Biden, he actually can lead and he can run things and he can do two things at once, unlike President Trump, who has botched this entire presidency, killed people either by coronavirus or by inciting a riot. So if you want to ask that question, ask it about the family of the Capitol cop who is being crushed indoors and had blood gushing out of his mouth. Ask the families of the Capitol cops who are dead. Ask the members whose lives were threatened with death during this insurrection whether or not the president should continue to be held accountable after he leaves office on the 20th. He must. Joe Biden needs to restore faith in our democracy. And unfortunately, that's going to be part of his job. It's going to be very ugly for Donald Trump in the weeks and months to come.
Well, first of all, no one should be offended by a question that is asked to spark debate. That's actually what our job is here. Secondly, as I said, Donald Trump is going to be prosecuted, most likely by the state of New York, most likely by the city of Manhattan. I would guess other jurisdictions are going to be doing that as well. So I was just asking a question, and, you know, I understand a lot of Trump supporters are snowflakes.
Thanks.
I don't think we should be snowflakes here. We ought to be able to ask questions and be able to
you got
answer.
the answer.
Well, yeah, I got the answer.
Right.
And you know what? I think we're better off for having asked that question and actually listening to a free exchange of ideas. I'm not offended by it. In fact, I think I'm going to have more coffee.
Okay. Yeah, that's a good thing to do. Still ahead on Morning Joe. We'll be joined by one of the Democrats.
Can I drink this
Yeah,
coffee?
drink it.
Can I ask questions? Is that okay?
One of the Democrats helping to lead the second impeachment effort against President Trump. Congressman Ted Lieu joins us.
What questions should I ask him, Mika?
I'll help you out.
Well, could you write them down for me, please? Because I'm new at this.
Plus, the fight over metal detectors inside the Capitol ramps up. Some Republicans have been bypassing the checkpoints, and now they could pay a price for it, literally. You're watching Morning Joe. We'll be right back.
We are not here to curse the darkness. We are here to light a candle.
I'm Chuck Rosenberg. On my podcast, The Oath, I talk with people who served with integrity and honor, men and women who light the way. This week, former FBI Assistant Director Frank Figliuzzi.
If you're all about harsh, rigorous, aggressive rules enforcement, you're not going to last very long as an organization because people will hate you for it. Your system won't have credibility. They won't report misconduct, and they won't cooperate with the core values you're trying to maintain. So with any disciplinary system, with any attempt in your family, your team, your community, your company, to enforce compliance, enforce regulations and values, you better have compassion along with consequences.
Join me for Season 4 of The Oath, an MSNBC podcast. Search for The Oath wherever you're listening right now and subscribe. New episodes every Wednesday.
Hi, everyone. Steve Kornacki here. You may remember I hosted an NBC News podcast called Article 2, Inside Impeachment, that followed the developments of President Donald Trump's first impeachment last winter. The Article 2 podcast is back with a special episode, bringing you the latest on the second impeachment of Donald Trump. I'm joined by NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Leanne Caldwell, who was in the Capitol on the day of the riots to break down the House vote and what a Senate trial could look like. Search for Article 2, Inside Impeachment, wherever you're listening right now, to subscribe for free.
The president bears responsibility for Wednesday's attack on Congress by mob rioters. He should have immediately denounced the mob when he saw what was unfolding. These facts require immediate action by President Trump. Accept his share of responsibility, quell the brewing unrest, and ensure President-elect Biden is able to successfully begin his term. The greatest statesman in the history of our country understood that the most dangerous threat to freedom is lawlessness. A young lawyer named Abraham Lincoln famously said, "There is no grievance that is a fit object of redress by mob law." Yet for several hours last week, mob law tried to interfere with constitutional law. Some say the riots were caused by Antifa. There is absolutely no evidence of that. And conservatives should be the first to say so.
House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy, with that rebuke of the president on the House floor yesterday, though he did vote not to impeach, McCarthy has argued for the president to be censured instead. Meanwhile, members of the Freedom Caucus want Wyoming Congresswoman Liz Cheney to resign from her post as chair of the House Republican Conference. Bloomberg reports that 3 members of the 44-member caucus began circulating a petition yesterday to force a special meeting to vote on a resolution for her resignation. Only 42 members of the House GOP are required to sign the petition in order to hold the meeting, but a majority would need to vote to adopt it. That vote would take place by secret ballot. Cheney responded to the effort with the following statement about her vote to impeach the president. Quote, "I'm not going anywhere. This is a vote of conscience. It's one where there are different views in our conference, but our nation is facing an unprecedented since the Civil War constitutional crisis. That's what we need to be focused on. That's where our efforts and attention need to be."
Let's bring in right now
Kudos to
NBC
her.
News Capitol Hill correspondent and host of Way Too Early, Casey Hunt. You know, Casey, this was a very difficult vote for 10 Republicans to make. But when it comes to Liz Cheney, they need to handle that situation with care because right now they're pariahs. I'm not talking about the 10 people that voted against sedition. I'm talking about people like Kevin McCarthy and members of the Freedom Caucus. If they think they're going to get any money from any companies, any corporations, any interests on K Street after voting to disqualify millions and millions of black votes, to pass sort of their own version of new Jim Crow laws or try to, they're out of their minds. Liz Cheney may be the only bridge from this crazed GOP House caucus and
to a future,
the respectable world.
It's a reckoning right now, Joe. What do they want to be? And Kevin McCarthy, in that bite we played coming in here, he tried to walk that line. He tried to say, okay, I don't want this remedy. I don't want impeachment. But he also was clear that President Trump bears responsibility. And I think what he's reflecting is the deep divisions that exist, concerns about money, absolutely. But had this vote in the House been a secret ballot, all of my reporting indicates it would have been more like 50 or 60 Republicans who would have voted to impeach Donald Trump. And some of them, I mean, we've reported extensively, have said that they were afraid for their lives. Others, of course, are making a political calculation and saying, I don't want to take that political risk for myself. I'm not willing to go out on this limb the way that Liz Cheney was willing to, calling this a vote of conscience. But it tells you that Kevin McCarthy, who is trying to lead this group of people, he is trying to figure out how to walk that line. And, you know, he has made political calculations all the way along here. He has his share of critics in terms of how he has dealt with this president, because he has been my Kevin all the way along here. But Joe, I got to tell you, this is still, I think, a very live issue where we go from here, from this impeachment to the trial to this question about whether there could be 17 Republicans who may be willing to vote to convict here. Mitch McConnell is still an open question, but that video that we showed from Donald Trump at the beginning of the show underscores to me that this is about what he decides to do. Is Donald Trump going to spend the next 6 days actually listening to advisors who are telling him this is very real, you could be impeached for this? Or is he going to continue to make statements that frankly are viewed as inflammatory, that seem to encourage the people who want to commit violence? Because I think if he does, there's a very real chance he'll be convicted in the Senate. That this is a very much a live issue on that front. I think that's why Mitch McConnell is being so careful here. And the other piece of this, while there is some under his control, There's a lot that's not. I mean, you saw what he said on Wednesday. He has fomented violence among his supporters, and they've said they want to go out and attack Washington on the inauguration. They want to attack state capitals on the inauguration. If that happens and we see violence across this country, it could also, I think, ultimately lead to conviction for the president, Joe.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And Willie, if you look at Kevin McCarthy, and sort of this conversion, semi-conversion he's had where he leaked, I think it was to Axios, he leaked that he said, "Just stop it, Mr. President, just stop it." Like he really said that. And then Mitch McConnell tearing up on the House floor. If you talk to people that know both of them much better than I do, they say that there's nothing they do that's not motivated by cynicism, by political considerations. And both of these breaks happened probably within 24 hours, maybe 48 hours, of some of the largest corporations in America saying, you know what, we're just not going to give money to your political outfits anymore. We're not going to give money to a Republican Party that supports Jim Crow laws, the reinstatement of Jim Crow laws when it comes to voting, that there's one rule for white people, but, that you guys are going to try to discount black votes in all of these areas. And so after they hear that money's going to start drying up, suddenly they have this road to Damascus conversion.
Yeah, let's be real clear about Kevin McCarthy. He put out a statement last Friday, so 6 days ago, for the first time recognizing Joe Biden as the president-elect. On January, 8th or 9th, something like that, the 8th, he put out that statement. He has been feeding the very lies that he condemned yesterday, that the president was partly to blame, that his rhetoric needed to be cooled down. Kevin McCarthy's on Fox News nearly every day for the last 2 months talking about how this was stolen, the fight is not over, that there were voting irregularities. He was at the forefront of pushing that. So I think you're right to be wise to follow the money. When you see campaign coffers begin to dry up, when corporate sponsors say, we don't want any part of this, we don't want to be associated with this, and the fact that it took an assault on the Capitol where his life, Kevin McCarthy's life, Mike Pence's life, Nancy Pelosi's life, the life of everyone in that building were threatened, it took that for him to finally recognize that Joe Biden is in fact the president-elect. And Casey, if you look at some of these Republican votes yesterday to impeach, there were 10 of them. There was a compilation put together by Ali Mutnick at Politico where she went through the spreads, the votes. Liz Cheney is in a Trump plus 43 district. Newhouse in Washington, a Trump plus 19. Rice in South Carolina plus 19. Kinzinger in Illinois, Trump plus 16. Gonzalez, Trump plus 14 in Ohio. The list goes on. The word courage is overused, but these certainly were acts of political courage with not a lot of upside other than doing the right thing.
Hey, it's Chris Hayes. This week on my podcast, Why Is This Happening? I'll be talking with author Ta-Nehisi Coates about the precarious nature of America's experiment in multiracial democracy.
This picture that we paint of ourselves as this oldest democracy, hallowed institutions, etc., it really doesn't match. And if you understand that, this isn't, the first attempted coup in American history, why is this shocking? The inability to picture, frankly, a group of white people overrunning the Capitol is a lack of acquaintance with American history in and of itself.
That's this week on Why Is This Happening? Search for Why Is This Happening wherever you're listening right now and subscribe.
And that's how many of them have explained it, Willie. Congressman Rice, in particular, was a surprise to all of us because he's from a very conservative area in South Carolina. He's already receiving blowback on Facebook, and his staff, frankly, was taken by surprise when he did this. But he said and explained himself as, this is a vote of conscience. How could I have voted any other way? And, one thing I will add to your conversation about McCarthy, too, is there does seem to be a perception, according to my reporting, that in a couple of months, everything will go back to some semblance of normal. We'll fall back into our old political patterns. The corporations will be distanced enough to resume giving that it won't really be a problem. And, I have to tell you that's been kind of the assumption all the way along that Republicans have applied to Donald Trump. Well, let's just get through this, and then eventually we'll go back to normal. And it started small, it started, or smaller anyway, with Donald Trump's comments about John McCain, other things where he crossed norms and boundaries, and Republicans said, okay, well, that's offensive. Some of them decried it. Eventually, they just started keeping their mouths shut. But things got worse and worse and worse and worse. I mean, by the time we hit this past summer, I was asking Republicans questions about whether the president was right to use tear gas to clear Lafayette Square so he could engage in that photo op with the Bible. And Republican senators wouldn't answer my questions. They kept walking right by me. And now we get to this point. It took the Capitol mob to get us this far. And the idea that they're already applying that logic of, okay, well, eventually things will just go back to normal is pretty remarkable to me. But that is what I'm hearing at this point.
All right, Casey Hunt, thank you so much. We always appreciate it. And yesterday, conservative commentator Guy Benson tweeted his thoughts on those Republican members who are attacking Liz Cheney. He said, if you were a Republican member of Congress who is angrier, or more likely pretending to be angrier with Liz Cheney than you are with Donald Trump after the last week, you are broken. Mika, what do you think of Guy Benson's tweet?
I mean, that's the bottom line. And we need to fix this democracy. And these people are broken. If they can't come to terms with the fact that, and Tom Nichols, you've been watching these Republicans, they have to understand the difference between right and wrong and the principles that our constitutions are based on, and perhaps the oath they took. How is Vice President Mike Pence not looking at the 25th, recognizing his oath and standing to his oath? How are these Republicans carrying out their oath of office when they continue to protect a deranged criminal who happens to be president?
They're not. That oath doesn't mean anything to them. These are the same people who swore to be impartial jurors in the Senate, signed a piece of paper that said, I will listen to the evidence and reach an impartial conclusion, while mugging for the cameras and saying, there's no way I'm going to listen to this evidence and I'm not going to reach an impartial conclusion. This is fear of the mob. This is playing to the gallery back home and putting personal interest above the country. It's been a rash of cowardice among people who really, I think the tragedy is among people who really don't believe what they're saying. I mean, you're going to have the guys like, I guess, Gohmert or Jordan or the usual crew. But, when you get people like Elise Stefanik or some of the others who voted against impeachment, do they really believe anything they're saying? Of course not. And that's the thing that's really shocking, is the depth of the opportunism and the cynicism and the self-interest at a moment of national crisis, at a moment of national peril, where there are thousands of troops in the streets of Washington turning our national celebration of democracy into an armed camp as if we've been threatened by ISIS or Al-Qaeda again. And instead, we're having to harden the inauguration against our own citizens who simply have been fed a diet of lies and cannot come to grips with a free and fair election, because of the very people who are now saying that we all have to get over it and move on and achieve some kind of unity.
At least 12 Republican lawmakers have picked a new fight on Capitol Hill, not complying with the building's metal detectors. Yesterday, a reporter for HuffPost recorded a dozen GOP lawmakers ignoring or sidestepping the newly installed metal detectors to enter the chamber. However, this act of defiance could come at a hefty price. Violations to the House's new security measures, such as ignoring the metal detectors, will cost members $5,000 for a first offense and $10,000 for a second offense. So I don't know what, and they got to wear masks too. Katty Kay, I can't even imagine the headlines around the world covering the United States of America as it stands right now.
dismay among America's allies watching what's gone on here over the course of the past 10 days and gripped. I mean, we've been doing 24-hour rolling coverage from Washington, and the audiences have never been higher. And there is this sense that America is not anymore automatically in that club of stable democracies like Germany and Denmark and Canada. You put it more in a sort of East European Hungary type bracket. And I think that's alarming for a lot of people. And it's not just what's happening right now, it's looking forward. Yes, Joe Biden is coming into office, and there's a lot of hope amongst America's allies that Joe Biden is going to restore some kind of sense of normalcy here. But there's also a realization that he has the most humongous inbox of dealing with COVID, dealing with the economic crisis, and dealing with the fault lines that are in this country, and dealing with the legacy of Donald Trump. And everybody's watching how there are still millions of Americans who are supporting this president and everything he stands for. And that's going to be a problem that Joe Biden's going to have to deal with.
And Reverend Al, these Republicans, though they play stupid on TV, aren't stupid enough to understand why those metal detectors went up. You now have members of Congress that posed with a gun and said that they were going after members of Democratic members of Congress, and put the pictures of those women up that she claimed to her people while holding a gun she was going after. You have over 100 members actually siding with those who committed sedition against the United States of America, trying to overthrow a presidential election. It's not really a reach that, with all of these threats and with members saying that they're going to be carrying guns onto the House floor, that they don't need to put up metal detectors. Because I'll tell you what, I sure as hell wouldn't go onto the House floor if people were carrying loaded guns onto the House floor that had been putting out campaign ads saying that they were going to target me. Nobody would.
It would have been the height of incompetence if they did not put new security procedures in, given that these threats were very publicly made by people that are on the House floor as House members against others. It would also be the height of incompetence if they did not come with new security measures after they had their building taken under siege. Let's not forget, we're talking about people that were held up in rooms for hours, not knowing if people would break through the doors. And now we're investigating whether some members of Congress or their staffs helped them do a walkthrough to figure out how to do that siege. And the third thing that is so alarming to me is that as these Republicans that refused to go through the metal detectors do that, are they setting an example that they now can say, I can decide whether I'm going through a metal detector? Well, what stops somebody from going to an airport today saying, I'm with them, I'll decide whether I go through a metal detector and start walking around them, because they shouldn't have any more rights than we do. If I have the right to decide as a member of Congress to ignore a metal detector in the House of Representatives or in the Capitol that was under siege, then I should have the same right at an airport. That's what they're saying to an American public, and that could be very dangerous all over this country.
100%.
Jonathan, with the chaos that's unfolded over the past week, what do the president's final days in the White House look like from what you're hearing?
Ooh, why can't we hear him?
We lost Jonathan's audio. Mika, we'll get back to him.
Yeah. All right.
At the top of the hour.
Let's take a break. Coming up now, attention turns to the Senate, where Mitch McConnell is rebuffing Democratic calls for a speedy trial. But it seems he also hasn't ruled out convicting Trump either. Plus, the president has less than a week left in the White House. So what is next for a man whose brand and business empire appear to be crumbling? Stephanie Ruhle joins us ahead with that. Morning Joe is back in a moment.
Hi, it's MSNBC's Hayes Brown. You know, these days there's just so much news to wrap your head around, it's challenging to get a deeper understanding of things. So every morning, go beyond the headlines with MSNBC Daily. It features written perspectives from people you know and trust, including Trymaine Lee, Mehdi Hasan, Liz Plank, and Frank Figliuzzi. They'll take you inside the most important issues of our times. Issues like systemic racism, domestic terrorism, and how we can bridge our political divide. Plus, you'll get a fresh take every morning from me. Start your day with MSNBC Daily at msnbc.com.